Shwmae a chroeso I Sgwrs, podlediad Consortiwm Canolbarth y De. Yn y podlediad hwn byddwch chi'n clywed y trafodaethau diweddara am bob math o bethau addysg. Hello and welcome to Sgwrs, the Central South Consortium podcast. In this podcast we'll bring you the very latest discussions on all things education.
Hello and welcome to a Central South Consortium podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the Enabling Equity and Excellence, which is CSC's regional approach that promotes sustainable school improvement and learning leadership so that schools can make informed decisions around equity and excellence. We will consider today the importance of this regional approach, which offers clear strategies for school improvement to realise the national ambition of creating strong and inclusive schools committed to excellence, equity and well-being. But before we get to our discussion, we need to do some introductions. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Emma Wilmot, Principal Improvement Partner for Professional Pathways and Equity. And I'm joined by a few colleagues this afternoon who I will now invite to introduce themselves. So I'll start with Emma Coates.
Hello, I'm Emma Coates and I'm the Strategic Lead for Leadership in Central South.
And John Welsh.
Hello, I'm John Welch and I'm the Lead for Equity and Wellbeing at Central South.
Kath Lewis.
Hello, I'm Kath and I am the Principal Improvement Partner for Curriculum, Cohesion and Assessment.
And Louise Newton.
Hi, I'm Louise. I am the Principal Improvement Partner for Pedagogy and Professional Learning.
And I have great pleasure in introducing Caroline Daly, who is Professor of Teacher Education at University College London Institute of Education, who has worked alongside us on the production of this regional approach. Good afternoon, Caroline, and a warm welcome to you.
Good afternoon, lovely to be here.
Thank you all. So I think it would be helpful to start by giving an overview of the document from inception to publication. The document has been co-constructed with stakeholders from across the region, teachers, school leaders, local authority and Central South colleagues. It's evidence informed and it's based on research. And we're currently in the second iteration of the document, which was published in October 2021. The Central South Enabling Equity and Excellence approach contains reference to the importance of having a shared language that should be known and understood by all stakeholders in order to ensure equity for all. This is something that we will come back to later on in our discussion. And the principles of this document align in supporting schools on their journey of education reform in Wales, high quality teaching and learning, high standards of well-being, excellent leadership, a high quality curriculum, along with a high quality professional learning form the basis of this document, alongside knowing our learners really well, so that we can understand their experiences, their backgrounds, their skill sets, and their barriers to learning. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Professor Caroline Daly to give her thoughts on the importance of the Equity and Excellence document, and then we'll take the viewpoints of other Central South colleagues. Caroline.
Thanks, Emma. Well, first of all, thank you so much for asking me to be here, but also to be involved with the team through the development of the document, because it really is inspiring to see the commitment to the learning of children and young people based on valuing them as individuals and what they bring to their school experience, their language, their cultures, their knowledge, their home lives, and actually saying, look, if we're going to really achieve equity in schools, we need to ask fundamental questions. Who are the learners and what do they know? And we need that real curiosity and interest in our learners to drive the way that we build learning around them. From that comes excellence. From that comes excellent teacher practice. And the thing this document does, which is just so impressive, I think, is the way that it says, without that focus, other kinds of agendas, other kinds of initiatives, other kinds of developments, they cannot be as powerful. If we start from the premise of equity and making school the best place for every child to be in the course of a day, because it's a place where they feel welcome, valued, where all their potential is recognised, however far it's being fulfilled at any given moment. If we make that the foundation for everything that we want to do around every kind of innovation with a curriculum and assessment and everything else, that's the most important thing we can do. And it's great to see that being so explicit in the way this document sets out its interest in the learners.
Thank you, Caroline. So I'm going to come to John. John, obviously in your position as strategic lead for equity and wellbeing, why would you say that this regional approach is really important to you and your role?
Yeah, so within my role in Central South, quite a lot of focus is on vulnerable learners and the barriers that a lot of these learners will face. What I really enjoy about the document and the approach is the premise of equity for all. This is about all learners. This is not about a poor dab syndrome or, feeling sorry for a group of learners particularly and trying to, put in specific intervention. I think the fact that we're looking at shared language, have a good understanding of equity as a starting point, because, it's about a knowledge of an individual pupil, and we know schools are hugely interested in that. But, you've got to understand the personal and social circumstances of those pupils prior to them making it to the classroom to give them a chance and success. So I like the way that the document starts around language, around how we're going to have that shared understanding and that shared responsibility across Central South and across a school. And that gives us a chance of making a difference to those key groups of learners, which on the back of things like COVID are facing, more problems and more difficulties within the classroom. So, that would be the starting point for me, the importance of that shared language and how that we can use this document together to try and support these pupils.
Thanks, John. And turning to Emma, obviously excellent leadership is critical as well in obtaining sort of equity and excellence in a school. So Emma, with regards to your role as strategic lead for leadership, what does this document mean to you and its principles?
I think this is an excellent document. I love the way it's set out, and like John said, the importance of the shared language about everybody in the school and organisation having a shared understanding of what we mean by all the terms, not just in this document, but what we refer into daily as well, through other areas, and the onus on leading by example, and head teachers really need to have a good understanding of this document first, and lead by example. And I think as well, the way that the reflection sections are set out is going to really help facilitate that discussion in school. And I can see the different reflection sections being used as talking points in staff meetings, their way to structure your senior management team meetings, so that you can take each section at a time and work through it and make sure that all your staff have that shared understanding of what it is, and actually how we are in school and how we are going to enable equity. Is everybody's role in the school, not just one person. So yeah.
I think that's right, Em, and I think the fact that you talk around the leadership style, which is obviously your first and foremost job within Central South, but I like the document is not just aimed at leaders, it's aimed at everyone across the school, and that gives that opportunity for everyone to buy in, and you can see yourself in a school at every role and every position being a part of this document. So I think I like that part of it, definitely, and I think it gives that opportunity at every level to really engage in that process.
So just turning to Lou, Lou, obviously your lead for professional learning and pedagogy, principal improvement partner for that. So, you know, again, sort of really, really fundamental pillars to you know, supporting equity in a school. I value your thoughts.
Yeah, I think what you can see throughout the document is that there's a real evidence-informed need to ensure that good quality professional learning is there, and the document really mandates it. But that's informed by evidence. It's not us just suggesting that that's a good thing to do. We know from extensive research, not our own, that of people far more equipped than I am to do that it's that high quality professional learning that's really, really going to create the change in our schools. And you know, we accept that there can be challenges to this, and the reflection questions encourage you to reflect on barriers as well and enablers. We know, you know, creating time and space, maintaining momentum, ensuring that professional learning is sustained. They are all challenges, but the document gives you a really clear process. And reflecting on what Emma said, you know, it's something you can use with your leadership team, you can use in your staff meetings. It's really practical and tangible. It doesn't just stay with the theoretical, it actually gives you a mechanism for working. And I think that high quality PL and commitment to it is the only way we can ensure that we've got a workforce equipped to provide equity and as Caroline said, drive to excellence, because without equity we won't have that. And in our current climate, and I'm sure Kath will pick up a lot of this when she speaks more to her role, but we can't underestimate the scale of change and the real need for professional learning to support us all with that. And as you said, the other aspect of my role is pedagogy. And what we know for all learners is the power of high quality teaching, that quality first teaching. I can't overemphasize that enough. And it's that and that alone that will make the most significant difference to all learners. Again, ensure that we achieve that equity and excellence. And I suppose for me, what I really like is that the E&E gives us a really secure process to bring about that sustainable and meaningful change. And it really does, you know, alluding to what John says, but whatever your role in a school, you can look at the document and see yourself. And for me, it's really important that you know, a high quality teaching is everyone's business. So I think for me, that's my key takeaways.
Thanks, Lou. And just on the back of that as well, I think it really, the document really appreciates that each school has its own individual context and staff and pupil demographic. And it recognises that different schools are at different points on their school improvement journey, and it takes into account, you know, the different sort of stages that a school is at on its journey.
Yeah, just from my point of view, just to pick up on the teaching and learning, we're in a position now at Central South where we're adopting the OECD DAC mandate for gathering information around our PDG plans and how our free school meal pupils are progressing. Now, obviously, we're in a world where that's under scrutiny. It's a significant amount of money. But the importance of excellent pedagogy within the classroom and that art of teaching is the absolute number one factor in improving outcomes for these pupils. Now we're in a world where FSM numbers are on the rise. You know, there's a significant amount of poverty. There are 55,000 pupils in Wales that weren't qualifying for free school meals prior to this and the changes in Wales. But there's never been a more important time for an excellent teacher in front of the pupils and knowing their pupils. We talked about that. You know, you've got to, you know, there are well-being factors in schools and there are support mechanisms in the place to support families and what have you, to get those pupils into school, to give them the best possible chance of achieving those good grades and that improvement in their knowledge by getting good, great teaching from the teacher in front of them. So I think that's the absolute key. And I think that's one area that we're wanting to see in things like the PDG plans. And we'll talk about the ALN Act later on. I would imagine we'll pick that up. But the importance of a good teacher has never been more prevalent than it is now.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back in. It's a bit remiss of me not to mention what Emma mentioned, really. If there was a silver bullet for high quality teaching, I'm sure, retire young and happy, because I'd have the solution that everyone needs. And I think the reflection that you offered there, Emma, is really, really important. There is no one singular approach to teaching. And I like that the E&E document doesn't try and suggest that there is. What it suggests you do is look very, very critically at your school, your context, but most importantly, your learners. And what you are doing is what your learners need. And I can imagine Kath is going to talk about that in the context of the curriculum for Wales as well. So I will shush, but I think that's really important.
Emma, have you got any additional viewpoints?
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on what Lou said then. Like, one of my favourite parts, like comments in the reflection is, when we ask, has your school developed a culture where, rather than asking what's wrong with a learner when progress is less than expected, to changing that to what needs to be improved or changed in the learning environment, our pedagogical approaches, our materials and activities, what can we do? So you're sort of changing that emphasis on what can we provide for that learner, and that really resonates with me.
Caroline, any additional thoughts to Emma's comment?
Just to say that's just so important, isn't it? Because, I mean, the document really sends the message that to help them to become excellent, they're not going to be doing that despite who they are and their backgrounds. They're going to be helped to be excellent because of who they are and because the school tangibly values who they are. And our pedagogy and our curriculum takes account of who they are and celebrates that as the way to help school to be meaningful. And that it comes through as such a strong message that I think it enables every school to have a starting point. You can't really argue with being interested in who these children and young people are and what they bring.
Thank you, Caroline. John?
Yeah, just to say, I completed an appreciative inquiry last week in a school in the Vale of Glamorgan, a secondary school, Whitmore High, and it was amazing to look at their culture and ethos when the day was looking at about exclusions and how well they're doing. But the culture and the ethos and the detail that they go into about the individual pupils within their classroom, the relationships that they've developed, fostered an amazing learning environment, and it made a difference to teaching. So this wasn't about they're running this wonderful intervention. Actually, that was talked about much later in the day. It was culture and ethos. It was pedagogy and barriers to the classroom were where they started in the appreciative inquiry. And I think that was absolute key. And it sings from this document that, they have identified that teaching, learning, leadership and well-being were the three areas, but and that was how they were impacting significantly on pupils' needs within their school. So fascinating, really.
Thank you, John. So, Kath, coming to you and your role, we know that a school's curriculum is obviously everything a learner experiences in school in pursuit of those 4 purposes, which are so critical. So I'd really like to gain your thoughts as to why this document is so important to you.
So, of course, building on everything that our colleagues have said so far, absolutely, this is not just a document. This isn't something that's static. It's offering clear approaches to realising that national ambition. I don't think anybody can disagree with that national ambition of strong and inclusive schools committed to excellence, equity and well-being. But something that Caroline has said has really resonated. I definitely feel this document is about getting to know our learners. And you said, Caroline, who are the learners? What do they know? And then, of course, what do we do about that? What do we need to do for them? What does the environment look like? And I think, without that focus, Curriculum for Wales couldn't possibly be as powerful as it aims to be. If we start with equity, with all of that potential recognised, we've got a foundation then for the curriculum design process to build upon. But, we have to understand how to inquire into, how to evaluate the impact of the curriculum and the pedagogy, that's going to be key to ensuring our reforms are successful and they meet that ambition of realising the four purposes. So yeah, it's so important on so many levels. Those models that are within it really support that robust self-evaluation, which is really critical to the process of curriculum design, that iterative process of testing, trialing, exploring, evaluating. But also just as important is even just the simple thing of the glossary and the shared definitions. Are we all meaning the same thing when we talk about equity, vulnerable learners? What do we mean by inquiry? And I think that's so key, as is then the end section with those roles and responsibilities. Do we all know whose role it is to support teachers in their professional learning? You know, who does that sit with? Do we all understand the part we have to play in helping to realise equity and excellence across the system? So yeah, that's where I stand on it. But it is really exciting. It is something that should be living and breathing in schools, using those reflection questions and not seen as something static that sits on somebody's desk, but it's engaged with by leaders right across organisations, from practitioners through to head teachers.
And just to sort of reiterate what you said, Kath, about roles and responsibilities, I think it's been, you know, during the co-construction of this document, I think it was absolutely imperative from the start and agreed by all that we really did clearly define those roles and responsibilities at all levels in the school, you know, from practitioner level all the way up to senior level and head teacher level, but also looking further beyond that to local authority staff, to Central South staff, and also looking at governance and beyond, really looking at sort of chief education officers of local authorities. They were very keen to have sort of a role in this as well, in ensuring that their schools are fully supported through the professional learning that we offer at Central South, but also in collaboration with our local authority colleagues to support schools to become equitable and excellent organisations. So I'd just like to sort of move on now, and we've very much talked about the necessity and the importance of having that shared language across a whole school community. I'd just like to garner your thoughts as to why this is so vital. I know we have touched upon that throughout the course of our discussion, but why is it so vitally important for communication that everybody in the whole school community really does understand that language? Louise?
I think what is possibly important to reflect on at this point, and I think we've kind of implied this, but perhaps not been explicit in our conversation before, the E&E document isn't designed as additionality. This is not a bolt-on. This is integrated into your monitoring and evaluation in your school improvement processes. And I think, you know, it's likely in all of our careers, and everyone who's listening, we've all occasionally been the victim of saying a word or phrase and assuming that everyone understood that word or phrase to mean exactly the same thing that you did. And then you return to monitor whatever it is you've spoken about in, you know, what agreed point in time, and discovered that actually perhaps you didn't all share an understanding. And I think, you know, because equity and excellence, much like we talked about learning and teaching, it is everyone's business. We had that conversation just now about all the different stakeholders who are part of this, and part of it as a living, breathing school improvement cycle, not as a bolt on the side. If we don't speak a shared language, if we don't all understand those terms to mean the same thing, it's fraught with difficulty. And I just think that real transparent, open approach to, you know, Kath used the example inquiry. I'll go there because it often sits with me. If I say inquiry, do we all understand the same thing by it? Because it should mean the same thing across the system.
Yes, just to echo that, and I think because we've been in a process now for a few years of this wide-scale reform of our education system, that shared language is more important than ever, because we need that shared language to be clear right across the 3 tiers of education in Wales, from policy through to classroom practice. And you know, where there has been discrepancies in the way that we use language, that has often really disrupted our process of, you know, the process of co-constructing the framework in the first instance, the process of rolling out professional learning, of making sense of that professional learning, of having impact back at school, because it is really critical that we use terms, we don't use them interchangeably. We all understand when we talk about pedagogy what we mean, when we talk about inquiry what we mean, when we talk about knowledge, skills and experiences in terms of curriculum for Wales, what do they mean? And we spend a lot of time in the professional learning that we do with schools in taking it always back to source. So for us, the equity, enabling equity and excellence document for CSE is a really good source to take that back to, as is then of course the national policy guidance and framework itself. So what we are always saying is, when you're not sure if you understand something, if you're unclear or you've heard a term, a word being used interchangeably, always take it to either the EE&E document or take it directly then to the national guidance that we've got, because clarity in language is just really critical for making sense of the huge reforms that we're dealing with.
Thanks, Kath. I think that's really, really important point about making sense of the plethora of reforms that we're experiencing at the moment. I'd just like to come to Caroline, because again, one of the most sort of important underlying sort of foundations of this document is that it doesn't promote a deficit view of any learner or group of learners. So Caroline, I'm really interested again in your thoughts on this, why this is so vitally important, that it isn't, you know, we don't view learners in through a deficit lens.
Well, I think the document makes it really clear that this is about practitioners and schools responding to the needs of learners. It's about making changes to practice, to school, to environment, to policy. It's not about trying to fix children and young people. Now that might sound sort of obvious, but I think it really needs to be said, doesn't it? When you think about the huge pressures that we're all under, and the quite right agendas to want young people to achieve all that they possibly can and get fairer chances in society, it's understandable that there can be a trend towards thinking that they've got problems that have to be fixed. And that's not for a moment to suggest that there aren't things in society more broadly that can be fixed to enable young people to have fairer chances. But the document is focused on the difference that we make as our responsibilities in education, as part of our responsibilities. It's not about saying the child or the learner has a deficit, has a problem, and that's why they're not thriving in the conditions of my classroom or in my school or in the playground. It's turning it all the other way round, and it's saying, how can my classroom, my school, the playground be a place that enables all these young people to thrive? And by turning it that way round, I think that's what came through so powerfully about the document's interest in placing the learners at the heart of the change that we want. It doesn't mean we're changing them, we're changing ourselves. But I mean, I think the document gave fantastic entry points to that. That could sound a huge thing to undertake, but actually those reflective questions really help at every level for people who are engaging with it to see, do you know, we've got our starting point here, or maybe we're already doing a huge amount. What can we build on? There's an entry point there for everybody in every school, and that's a real strength, I think, in terms of making this something that is absolutely attainable for all schools. How could a document that was about equity and excellence be something that was excluding of any schools? And it's the opposite. all practitioners can find their place to start on in that document.
Thank you, Caroline. Kath?
Yeah, I think we are so fortunate in Wales that actually placing learners at the heart, as you just said, Caroline, is the national ambition, you know, and that the whole reforms in Wales are all fundamentally about that. And when, you know, busy teachers are trying to do that, actually what Curriculum for Wales does is it enables that, because now we don't have an overloaded curriculum of nationally prescribed learning outcomes and intentions and content. There's so much that is decided locally, so it gives that opportunity to make sure that we're making the right decisions, not just in our curriculum but in the pedagogy, so about how we can best meet the needs of all of our learners, and, you know, with those authentic contexts. So I think that's really exciting, because the full purpose is ultimately the aspiration, the aim of our Curriculum for Wales is all about placing those learners at the heart, helping them realise their potential. So I think that ties in really neatly. That the EE&E is very much that entry point, but so is the Curriculum for Wales framework and guidance as well.
Thanks, Kath. I'm turning to Lou now, because obviously there's no substitute for knowing the strengths and weaknesses of your own school. And one of the school improvement models that is promoted within the document is the adaptive capacity model, which really allows schools to drill down into aspects of provision and really look at the impact of provision and practices for pedagogy and inclusion and the impact that has on outcomes for learners. So, Lou, would you be able to give your opinions and your thoughts as to why you think adaptive capacity is a really, really worthwhile model of school improvement?
Happily, yeah. I think there's a few sort of key points to bring out front and centre. The first thing is that the model doesn't try to suggest that a school has capacity or doesn't. It's not about evaluation, it's not about accountability, and it's certainly not about viewing anything through a deficit lens. What it tries to suggest, and I'm sure we've all been in situations where, I don't know, you've done some form of monitoring activity. Let's say you've been on a learning walk and you've picked something up, and you're sitting there and perhaps you're discussing it in SLT, or you're reflecting on it at another time, and you're thinking there's something that's not quite there with that aspect of practice. And it might, let's use a pedagogical example. There's something that's not quite there in terms of modelling and scaffolding. But you're not, you know it's not quite there, but you don't know exactly what you need to do to improve it. What adaptive capacity allows you to do, we hope, is to really, as you said, Emma, sort of get under the skin of what the actual issue is. Now, what we're suggesting through this model is that if something's not quite there, or even if something's actually pretty good in your school and you just want to look at how you can improve it further, it will be through one of the five things highlighted in the model. It's either going to be something to do with the amount of knowledge that's in the school. So if I use that modelling and scaffolding example, do we all know what that is in our school? Do we have the shared language? Do we have research and evidence to draw on around those things? And then the next thing it asks you to consider is the leadership capacity, and the professional standards can help us reflect on that. But is there a named person in the school? Do we know who is leading this and who is driving it? And depending what is in the centre of that model, it could be that it's someone with a named leadership responsibility, or it could be that it's a staff member without that. But when we're talking about leadership, we're talking about leadership at all levels, and it's knowing who is leading and driving this improvement within the school. And then again, we look at teaching capacity, and again we can link that to the professional standards, and we can look there for a steer as to what we should be looking for. But does every practitioner in the school have a shared understanding and a shared approach to whatever it is that we've put in the centre of the model? And then the last two dimensions are around culture and climate and systems and processes. And I know John gave us an example earlier, and those two things can't be underestimated, really. We do very carefully need to consider, do we have a culture and climate in our school where ideas and practice can grow and build, and people are able to develop things, and again, that's closely linked to the professional learning and our ability to discuss things with colleagues and raise issues and make improvements through that way. And then if we've got the culture and climate for those things to happen, have we also got the systems and processes to actually take things to scale? And for those two dimensions, the Schools as Learning Organisations model can be really, really helpful in giving us a steer on what that can look like. So as I say, the model is intended to generate really as many questions as answers, but I guess when you've got an area that you're looking at and you want to improve it, but you're not quite sure how to improve it or exactly what it needs for improvement, drilling into those 5 areas can be quite a useful starting point to help us reflect on what it is we need to do.
Thanks, Lou. That's really, really useful, and we've seen it used in a few instances, and it really, really is sort of paying dividends, isn't it? That use for the adaptive capacity model, really getting into the nitty-gritty of aspects of provision that need to be improved. I'd just like to move on to looking at some of the work that has been done with schools with one particular group of learners, I suppose, John, the additional learning needs reforms that have happened. The transformational lead for Central South, Liz Jones, has obviously produced a lot of documentation, but I'd just like to invite you to just sort of discuss why the Equity and Excellence document is very much seen as, I suppose, a sister document to the documentation that has been produced by Liz Jones.
Yeah, I mean, Liz has been an active part of both documents, actually, and played a crucial role in us, transitioning to the new ALN Act. Just reading the document, that my favourite part is inclusive education is about meaningful participation and achievement of all learners. And I think that's absolutely critical when discussing this, and that jumps out at me. We had a meeting recently with Liz about what we need to do now. The ALN transformation is in process. The Elencos should sit on the senior leadership team, should sit alongside pedagogy and really drive teaching and learning in the schools. Those things are in process now, but where do we go next? And Liz was clear, and sound like a broken record here, but the most important thing is providing a high quality teaching and learning for these learners within the classroom. And it's not about intervention. That's obviously going to be an important part, and knowing your learners and catch up and all of those kind of things on the back of COVID and generally, the barriers to learning. But the most important thing is ensuring high quality teaching and learning, and using the document, using the adaptive capacity, or using your systems within the school to develop your teaching and that consistency across the board, in secondary schools, department to department, and in primary schools throughout the school. So I think the two documents sit side by side. Not one's more important than the other, but they're absolutely aligned to show the importance of effective leadership, effective teaching, learning, and effective well-being, and how important the three of them sit in driving standards for all of our pupils.
And I think it's really important to remember the comprehensive sort of professional learning offer that we have built in and planned in conjunction with schools and local authorities, and also to remind I suppose people who listen to this podcast of the importance of and the strengths of the Central South Wales Challenge, which, as we know, is the partnership of all schools and settings across the CSC region working together to develop a self-improving system. So I don't think we can stress the importance of that. That is a huge strength of the region, that we do have this collaboration and this professional learning offer. So whatever the need and whatever you need to improve in the school, whether it's teaching and learning leadership, whether it's curriculum, whether it's pedagogy, professional learning, well-being, you know, we do have the support there to work alongside schools to improve standards and outcomes and allow children to thrive. So I think that's really, really important. So thanks for all of your such insightful and meaningful explanations of what the document means to you in relation to your areas of responsibility. I think the quality of conversation has been excellent this afternoon, and your passion for supporting colleagues across the region on their journey to achieving equity and excellence for all is infectious. And no doubt we could talk about this hugely important subject for hours, but for the purposes of this podcast, alas, we have to bring our dialogue to a close. So many thanks to you all, and diolch yn fawr iawn.
Diolch am wrando ar y bennod hon o Sgwrs. Cofiwch ein dilyn ar Twitter a Facebook, tanysgrifio ein sianel YouTube, ymuno yn cymunedau ar ein gwefan a darllen ein bwletin ysgolion wythnosol am y newyddion diweddaraf. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sgwrs. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, join our online communities via our website, and read our weekly school bulletin for the latest news. Hwyl am y tro. Bye for now.